hear now a reading from God's holy word. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Since the first Sunday of July in the year 1985, I have been on most Sunday mornings stepping up into a pulpit somewhere with both the privilege and responsibility of letting my words intermingle with the word, and by the power of God's life-giving Spirit bring hope and comfort and challenge to those who have gathered with me. The gathered congregation has been for me, as a preacher, the oxygen in the room. Sunday after Sunday, year after year, the words that I have typed on an inanimate piece of paper have come alive because of the collective energy in the room provided by those sitting in the pews, even those not paying attention. I have said many times before that while the preacher and maybe a few limited other participants get paid to be here, everyone who shows up has a job of equal value. Today, I'll have to admit that I have felt even more acutely the value of your job as a worshiper in the room with me. If I've ever taken you for granted, and I hope that I have not, I promise you I will never take you for granted again. Stepping into this pulpit today, March 22nd in the year 2020, is an experience for me, and I guess for every other leader of faith communities around the world, unlike anything we've ever known before. The closest I can recall in my lifetime was Sunday, September the 16th, 2001, the first Sunday after 9/11. Like today, we were then, as a whole country, in a shared state of anxiety and uncertainty. At the church I served then, Toxaway United Methodist Church, I remember so well that on that Sunday, the gathered congregation, which was typically about 20-some people, was nearly 60. Folks showed up who had not been to church in a long time, and some came for the first time. I think it was the same in churches and synagogues and mosques around the country. As faith leaders, that crisis led us all to pull out of our known toolbox what we have as faith people, particularly as followers of Jesus, what we have to do in times of crisis. We gather. We get closer to one another. We hug necks and we embrace with our arms and we shake hands and we sit side by side and we wipe away each other's tears and we come to the table. This crisis has thrown us all for a loop. One of the best tools we have in our toolbox is exactly the thing we're being told not to do. And for good reason. Healthcare professionals tell us that social distancing and In some places now, sheltering in place orders and quarantining are the very best tools we have at our disposal right now to slow the spread of this global pandemic virus. Those tools, however, have made my favorite tool, face-to-face gathering, not only something that's not helpful, but potentially destructive and dangerous. It is profoundly important that we follow the instructions to avoid public gatherings and to stay home as much as possible. Because of this, we faith leaders are being forced to dig deeper and look for other tools. For all of its downsides, I am more grateful today than ever for devices and technologies that allow a level of connection from a distance which we would not have had in earlier times. I'm grateful to be able to come to those of you who are viewing this service and message via Facebook or YouTube. Believe me, it's not the same, I know, but it's better than not being able to come to you at all. But I got thinking about and asking myself, what else is in this toolbox that Jesus has handed us all to get us through life? What else is there? Prayer. When Jesus was asked about how best to pray, he told his followers that there was far more value in solitary praying in one's own quiet place than all the flowery public prayers ever offered. That's why I've never got much worked up about the whole prayer in school kerfuffle. For every student in every public school in America still has access to the kind of solitary praying Jesus recommends. The Supreme Court did not and could not change that. What can we do in this crisis while staying home from work or school or recreational activities? Well, for one thing, we can get about solitary praying. It will make a difference. Prayer is in that toolbox Jesus has given us. What else is there? Compassion. If we open our Jesus toolbox, we cannot miss the compassion. It's like a box of 10,000 nails. It's everywhere in the Jesus story. Compassion is about looking out for each other. Compassion is trying to see things from another's perspective. Compassion recognizes that while survival of the fittest might be the rule of evolution, being individually fit depends on a willingness to work together and to promote the common good. And that is the rule of Jesus, as well as the rule of most major world religions. Compassion that leads to concern for others and sharing resources is what the world needs now more than ever. You see, compassion is in our toolbox. Jean saw on Facebook yesterday a picture posted by one of her contacts of a couple at Sam's Club here in Anderson, and they had found toilet tissue. And they had loaded their car down with toilet tissue. And they were proud of their find. Now, I don't know what their intent was. If they were headed to the Salvation Army to share at least half of what they'd gotten with the folks there, well, then God bless them. But if they were hoarding it for themselves, well, how shameful. Now, we have toilet tissue here at South Main that had been generously shared with us long before this ever happened. And let me tell you, if you need some, we will share. I also want to thank the city of Anderson for providing a portable potty and an outdoor hand washing station. And just ask that if you happen to be driving by or regularly in this neighborhood, help us keep an eye on that. You see, taking care of one another is in our Jesus toolbox. And it turns out that taking care of one another is consistent with our shared survival. I saw on social media yesterday this story years ago, Anthropologist Margaret Mead was asked by a student what she considered to be the first sign of civilization in a culture. And the student expected Dr. Mead to talk about fish hooks or clay pots or grinding stones. But no, Dr. Mead said that the first sign of civilization in an ancient culture, when they're digging up remains, the first sign of civilization was a femur, was a thigh bone that had been broken and then healed. Dr. Mead explained that in the animal kingdom, if you break your leg, you die. For you see, you cannot run from danger. You can't get to the river for a drink or hunt for food. You are meat for prowling beasts. No animal survives a broken leg long enough for the bone to heal. A broken femur that has healed is evidence that someone has taken time to stay with the one who has fallen. And someone has bound up the wound for them. And someone has carried that person to safety and has tended to the person through their recovery. Helping someone else through difficulty is where civilization starts, Dr. Mead says. That's compassion. Compassion is something critically needed in our world right now, and we have that in our Jesus toolbox. We also have Sabbath in our toolbox. Jesus came out of a tradition that held the practice of Sabbath in high regard. In fact, Jesus himself got crossways with the defenders of the Jewish faith for not strictly following rules set out for Sabbath practice. Unfortunately, I wonder if maybe we followers of Jesus have let that part of his story water down our own respect for a common Sabbath. Something I do not think that really Jesus ever intended. One of the rare gifts of this virus is that we have all been forced into a Sabbath. From the very start of creation, God told us that Sabbath was necessary to life. God, the Creator, set it into place. God, the story of creation says, God himself took a Sabbath from his creation work. The seventh day he rested. God knew the creation needed us to practice Sabbath. Already, we are being told that after just a few days of the world practicing a shutdown, the air is cleaner, the rivers and the streams and the lakes are clearer, the wildlife seems to be happier. You see, perhaps our compulsive going and going and going and going and doing has taken a toll on the rest of creation. Now let me say about the slowdown and the shutdown. Some of our brothers and sisters do not have the opportunity to slow down or shut down during this time. Those working in critical areas of healthcare, law enforcement, emergency services, sanitation, public works, utility providers, grocery store and pharmacy employees, food service workers, truckers, or anyone else who helps deliver to the rest of us the essentials of physical life, they are not allowed to hunker down and stay at home. This is why it is so important that those of us who are not providing those services honor what is being asked of us. Yes, it may be inconvenient, and it even may lead to painful sacrifices. But we must do it, if not for ourselves, for them. For you see, our survival is connected to their survival. We must support them however we can. Sabbath is in our toolbox. Let's practice it for the benefit of all. Finally, the sacred scriptures are in our toolbox. I shared words from those scriptures with you this morning. Psalm 23 was the lectionary passage for today. These words are familiar to us and have brought us hope and comfort so many times before when we have been anxious and feeling uncertain. As I was reading through this passage one more time in preparation for today, the verse, God prepares for me a table in the presence of mine enemies, stood out to me as never before. I guess I never really thought that much about that part of the psalm. The green pastures and the still waters and the valley of the shadow and the rod and the staff and dwelling in the house of the Lord, all that had captured me. More than that phrase, God prepares for me a table in the presence of mine enemies. Reflecting upon that, I got wondering, what kind of table has God prepared for me? And why has he set it up in the presence of enemies? Is this a kitchen table where I can get the essential food for the day? Is this a dining room table where I can gather with those whom I love for fellowship? Is this a banquet table where I can celebrate a feast larger than life? Is this a negotiation table where I can give something and get something in return? Is this a library table where I can get more knowledge for understanding? Is this a peace table where I can come face to face with what threatens me and unsettles me? What kind of table is this? And why a table in the presence of mine enemies? Would not a fortress or an arsenal be better to have when dealing with enemies? Would not beefing up my stock of weaponry and ammunition be the sensible thing to do in the presence of an enemy? Evidently, some folks think so, as we've been told that gun and ammunition sales have soared over the last few days. Somehow, I think a microorganism may not be taken down by an AK-47. What kind of table? And why a table? In our Jesus toolbox, we find a table. It's an upper room table. It's a table where hard news is delivered. It's a table where fear pulls up a chair. It's a table where friends turn against one another. It's a table placed in a room of incredible uncertainty. But in the middle of all that, Jesus, who is at the center of the table, picks up bread and wine, and he lifts them in thankfulness and prayer, and he turns them into instruments of eternal saving love. Jesus makes it a table of love. He does so in the presence of some mighty powerful enemies: fear, anger, betrayal, maybe even greed. But Jesus does not back down. He raises the bread and the cup and he boldly declares that love will win. Jesus gives himself completely to the work of love. And because he did that, we have that same love in our toolbox. Love will get us through this. Let us use this time to think long and hard about how we will love one another and the world around us today. And when we get to the other side of this crisis, and we will get to the other side, let's not lay down that tool. Let's keep love the focus of who we are and all we do. Let's work to create a world with structures that are more and more based on love instead of fear and betrayal and greed. I meant to bring to our table this morning items from our snack pack bags. in the midst of getting ready today, I forgot I was going to